In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace a toilet. Replacing a toilet is not as difficult as you may think. There's really one major reason why toilets crack when you tighten the bolts, and I will show you that in a sketch at the end of this video on why this happens. First thing you need to do is shut the water off. The shutoff valve is located right behind the toilet. The handle for my shutoff valve is missing. When I used a pair of pliers to turn the valve, it did not completely shut the water off. So I had to shut the water off to the house at the main. While I have the water shut off to the house, I will be replacing this valve. I made a video on how to replace a shutoff valve, and I will leave a link for that in the description. Once you have the water shut off, the next thing to do is drain the toilet. To remove the water, flush the toilet and hold the lever down until the water stops draining. You can use a shop vac or a sponge to remove the remaining water. I'm going to use the sponge method. Remove the lid from the tank to soak the rest of the water out with a sponge. You're probably wondering why this looks so dirty. I have well water running to my house. The previous owners didn't keep up with the water softener filters. What you see here is the sediment from the well water. This is one of the reasons why I'm replacing the toilet. Now, you don't have to replace the toilet because of this. You could clean it out or just replace the inside parts. The other reason why I'm replacing the toilet is I just don't like it. Keep soaking the water out with a sponge until the tank is completely empty. Once you're done with that, remove the remaining water in the bowl. Now that the water is removed from the tank and the bowl, you can remove the supply line. I'm going to be replacing the valve, so I'm going to remove the supply line from the valve and the tank. If you're not replacing the valve or the line, you can leave it attached to the valve and just remove it from the tank. Next, remove the toilet bowl caps and loosen the nuts. Now you can lift the toilet. If the toilet is caulked to the floor, you may have to cut the caulk. Before installing the new toilet, you have to remove the old wax ring. There may be a rubber flange in the wax ring that you'll need to remove as well. It should look something like this. Once you have the flange out, finish removing the wax. Also remove the old bolts. Now it's time to install the new bolts. When you buy your new toilet, it may come with a wax ring and a bolt kit. You'll have to make sure this is included. If not, you'll need to purchase them. The toilet bolt is eye-shaped. Once it's inserted into the slot, turn it so it can't pull through the slot. Then slide the plastic retainer over the bolt to hold the bolt in place. These plastic rings will keep the bolts in place and keep them from moving when installing the toilet. If your bolt kit didn't come with plastic rings, you can use some of the old wax ring to hold the bolts in place. I install the wax ring next. I prefer using a thicker wax ring with a flange. The flange keeps the wax from slipping into the path of the waste from the toilet. Now I can set the toilet. I don't install the tank until after I've installed the bowl. This makes it easier to install the bowl. Line the bolts up with the holes and set the toilet in place. Once the toilet's in place, sit on it to make sure it's set into the wax ring. After setting the toilet in place, make sure the toilet doesn't rock. If it rocks, you'll have to use some kind of shims. My toilet appears to be rocking on the seam of this tile right here. Before I secure the bolts, I will shim the back of the toilet. Before installing the nut, get the cap kit and locate the cap receiver and install it before the nut. After the receiver, install a flat washer and the nut. Don't tighten it fully, just snug it up. Now I'm going to shim the back of the toilet. I'm using a wood shim, however it would be better to use plastic or a washer or a penny or a dime. Now the reason why I snugged the bolts down before I shimmed is you don't want to lift the toilet, you just want to shim it enough to get rid of the rock. If you shim the toilet too much and you tighten the bolt, you do stand the chance of cracking the bowl. Here I'm adding extra shims to make sure the toilet doesn't rock. Once you have the toilet shimmed, just give the nut a quarter turn, no more than a half, to snug it up. As long as the toilet doesn't move or spin, that's tight enough. Now I'll install the tank. In the toilet kit, there's a rubber seal that goes between the tank and the bowl. Install this on the tank. It should look something like this. Now I carefully set the tank on the bowl. Now find the 2 tank bolts from your toilet kit. If there is a cone-shaped rubber washer with your kit, make sure the cone shape goes down and the flat side goes to the head of the bolt. Now insert the bolt through the hole in the tank. Install the rubber washer onto the bolt first, then the flat washer. The rubber washer on this side doesn't prevent water from leaking out of the tank. It helps ensure against over-tightening of the nut. You'll notice here the tank is not touching the bowl. You'll want to start tightening the nut and bolt until the tank touches this area right here. The toilet I bought already had a wrench included with the toilet kit. You can see here I'm closer, but it's not quite touching the flange yet. Now I've tightened it enough for the tank to touch the bowl. Once the tank is touching the bowl and the tank is no longer loose, tighten the nut 1 to 2 more full turns until you see the rubber washer flare out around the bolt. Now there may be a nut where the supply line goes. Remove it. Now I'll install the water supply line. The larger plastic fitting end goes to the toilet tank, and the smaller compression fitting end goes to the water valve. Here I'll use an adjustable wrench to tighten the supply line. You don't want to over tighten this nut either. There's a rubber washer in the fitting that could get damaged if you over tighten the nut. Wiggle the line as you're tightening the nut. Once the line snugs up and doesn't wiggle, give the nut one more full turn. If there's a leak when you turn the water back on, just tighten the nut until the water stops leaking. Now I'm going to install the lever. Insert the arm from the handle into the hole in the front of the tank. Slide the rubber washer on first, then the nut. All you have to do is hand tighten this nut. It doesn't have to be super tight. There's a chain on the flapper that will hook into the hole on the end of the rod. Next, I take the rubber hose from the fill valve and install it into the overflow tube. This hose fills the bowl with water after you flush the toilet. Make sure the flush handle lifts the flapper. You may have to make some adjustments to this once the tank is full of water. Now I'm ready to turn the water back on. When you turn the water back on, check both fittings on the ends of the supply line to make sure they're not leaking. Also check the area where the bolts go through the tank. If any of these areas are leaking, just tighten enough to stop the leak. Now the fill valve that comes with your toilet should be factory set to fill your tank with the proper water. Flush the toilet a few times and check for leaks. If you get water coming from under the toilet at the floor, do not retighten the floor bolts. A leak at the floor when you flush the toilet may mean you installed the wax ring wrong or the wax ring isn't thick enough. Tightening the nuts here will not stop the leak and could result in breaking the toilet. Once you're sure there are no leaks, you can install the bolt caps. If the bolts are too long and the caps won't fit, you may have to use a hacksaw to trim the bolts down. Now I can install the seat, and that's really easy to install. Now all the seats are a little different, may have a few different components, but the main thing is just stick the bolts through the top and put the nuts in through the bottom. This toilet seat just happened to have some rubber washers that went underneath the clips. Once you're done tightening the bolts, just snap the lids down. Place the lid back on the tank, and you're done. This is the situation I had on my floor, and that's why it was rocking. And I placed shims in the front and the back of the toilet. In the beginning of the video, I told you I'd show you why toilets crack during installation. If the floor is concave at the bolt line and you tighten the bolts, this will result in a cracked toilet. To check for this, hand tighten the nut snug until it touches the bowl. Then take a shim where the bolts are and make sure the shims do not go under the bowl. If a shim does fit in this area, tap the shim in so it's tight, then give the nut 1/4 turn, and that should do it. If you want to see more videos like this one, I'll leave a link in the description to a playlist for plumbing videos. Please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Until next time, thanks for watching.